Welcome to the class. We always start with a picture from the garden. Look carefully at this. Albert Einstein was presumed to have said, look deeply into nature and you'll understand everything better. So what do you see? What do you see coming up out of the ground? Weeds. Cover crop. See the fava beans? Nitrogen-fixing plants that are going to restore the soil, make the grapevines happy in the fall when they bear fruit. So this is part of a regenerative biodynamic cycle of replenishing the soil by planting rotational cover crops, particularly legumes, beans, that fix nitrogen in the soil. So tonight's very special guest and a couple of unusual occurrences. Tonight is going to be our midterm feedback. So if you're an enrolled student in the class, Lila Adler is our class rep. Lila, stand up, please. Wave to everyone. Thank you for being the class rep. Lila is going to take you through a process at the end of class. We're going to end at about 7:45, and what's going to happen is you're going to come down the aisle. You're going to get a old-fashioned written form. You're going to fill it out, and then when you go out this door, you're going to hand it to Lila, and she's going to give you the secret code that's going to let you do your attendance. How about that? Pretty tricky. So we've no Kahoot tonight, but just your important, valuable feedback for our benefit. And before we get started, a couple things. Last week we were so privileged to have the team from Civil Eats here, and they were teaching us about digital and media literacy and the importance of looking carefully and skeptically at the news we read and the sources. Look at this headline. This is really interesting. Bubble burst. Researchers question long-term health and environmental effects of plant-based diet, and a big picture of the burger made from plants. So what's interesting about this, I thought, if you read the article, it's not about the plant-based diet. It's about what's in the fake meat burgers. So some of the research that's coming out now is now saying that the health implications of the ingredients and processes may not be as healthy for you as the real thing, and actually may have unintended consequences in terms of environmental benefit. So this is just a great example of the narrative being driven by companies getting ahead of the science and our need to be diligent and attentive to seeking the truth, right? If you read Civil Eats this week, which I hope you did with your free subscription that came with your class enrollment, you'd know what is the next kale. Does anybody have a guess? What's going to be the next big plant-based food? Come on. Lentils or chickpeas, garbanzo beans. So get out there and start a garbanzo bean company. Okay, this class is about how we are going to transform the food system in response to the urgent challenges we're facing with respect to climate, planetary health, and human health. Obesity, diabetes, just running off the charts. We're focusing on how our personal values translate into action. We're learning about food systems. We're developing food systems intelligence, and we're getting a grasp of the tool sets of entrepreneurial agency. And we've been stressing this semester, we're bringing you amazing change makers to class who are leading the way from one state of being to another, and our guest tonight is really a standout expert in that. One of the skill sets that entrepreneurs use and refine and develop is that of pattern recognition. And I thought we'd kind of practice tonight. If you go back to the people that we've had as guests since the beginning of the class, you start with the first week and go through weeks through the 4th week and the 5th week, I'm going to describe who we had here, and I want you to start looking for what you see in common, or what's the pattern that you might recognize in these. So remember the first week we had an activist who graduated in 1964 from UC Berkeley. She became a Montessori teacher and then a restaurateur, and then started the Edible Schoolyard Project, which has created edible education for people of all ages. That was Alice Waters, really my collaborator and colleague in this class. And when I think about her kind of entrepreneurial superpower, I think of like persistence. You know, Chez Panisse is going to celebrate its 50th anniversary in just, I think, next year. And her persistence of being out in the world, making the case for organic and now for regenerative, and for children having an opportunity to learn how to grow things and cook things. That persistence is really a common quality around change makers. And then we had Bryant Terry, a chef, an author, an educator, someone really moving the culture in the direction of plants. Best-selling vegan cookbooks, connecting to cultural traditions, and really speaking up for people that are maybe underrepresented or not heard from in the food system. So he's really, I see him as kind of a great storyteller and a connector and a bridger. Then we had Kathleen Merrigan, remember, from really working with great academic background in both nutrition and agriculture, and then moving from the academy into the government. She served 8 years in the Obama administration as the deputy secretary of the USDA. Really somebody that could speak multiple languages to multiple stakeholders and constituencies, and really brought a very exciting vision of her new program at ASU in sustainable food systems. We also had, of course, a climate champion scientist, Wendy Silver, joined by 3 regenerative farmers, all experimenting, testing, bringing new models to bear, and really seeking the evidence that what they're doing is going to contribute meaningfully to climate change. And that brings us to last week, where we had journalists and media entrepreneurs. The people from Civil Eats do such good work, and one thing that they exude to me is a sense of humility. They just do their work. They don't focus on promoting themselves, or they're very kind of stoic in their presentation of Civil Eats. But I'm glad you got a chance last week to really hear the kinds of challenges they're facing. And then tonight, we have a eco-warrior turned corporate executive, and I'm going to let Carla speak for herself, but I want you to kind of look for the characteristics of this change maker. But one thing I'll just share with you that I found is that they all bring a diverse set of experiences to what they do. They didn't do just one thing. They did many things. And really at the heart of this class is the opportunity for you, in whatever discipline you're concentrating in right now, to connect with other disciplines and understand the interdependencies and the relationships. So tonight we're going to talk about big food. Big food is often implicated in some of the challenges with climate and health. And big food, I'm showing you this chart up here. It's produced by an academic named Phil Howard, who's at Michigan State University. He's very conscientiously mapped the aggregation and the consolidation of the food industry for many years. This is the last time he published this, was in 2016. But big food is actually made up of a lot of little food companies. And over the last 20 to 30 years, the larger food companies have acquired lots of small companies. And back when I started in the natural and organic food industry, there was quite a distinction between the small companies and the big companies, and you'd never even see a person in a suit at the expo. Remember, Greg? No suits. no venture capitalists, no investors. Now the Anaheim Expo attracts like 80 to 90,000 people a year, and it's a gigantic global business. So into big food, we are going to also look tonight at the triple bottom line, which was a concept introduced about 25 years ago by a man, one of my friends and heroes named John Elkington, who lives in London, and he really put on the map the idea that corporations needed to report on more than just their profitability, that they needed to be accountable for their social and environmental impacts, both positive and negative. And he's really rallied that notion into the mainstream. But just last summer, he had an article in the Harvard Business Review, which we assigned to you to read, that said he wanted to kind of recall that concept because it really hasn't taken root in a substantive way. Now, since that article was published, we've seen people like Larry Fink, the chairman of BlackRock, come out and say, BlackRock being one of the world's largest money managers, saying, we're actually going to start making our investment decisions based on companies' adherence or compliance or performance with respect to the climate crisis. So things are moving, and we're really happy tonight to have a leader who is traversing a really kind of treacherous and complex path to move from what we'd call the status quo, into a new paradigm. So tonight, our guest is going to talk about how change happens from within, and this coincides really nicely with a case study that we just prepared here at the Haas School of Business, studying how does change happen in a really large company that is a system unto itself with its own values and mission and purpose and long-standing behaviors and market pressures and expectations. So tonight, I'd like you to pay close attention to Carla's talk, where the systems dance, Donella Meadows systems dance, presents itself. And I've highlighted a couple of areas to keep an eye on. Of course, I always highlight get the beat, because it reminds us that the system is really a dynamic place. It's not a mechanistic environment. It's a dynamic, living environment. So number 3, expose your mental models to the open air. You're going to hear tonight how mental models in a large corporate structure are being opened and re-examined. Number 11, expand thought horizons. 12, expand the boundary of caring. You're going to hear a lot about stakeholders, diverse groups of stakeholders. 13, celebrate complexity. How do we hold all of these competing and challenging trade-offs and tensions and continue on the path of progress? And then finally, hold fast to the goal of goodness. And it's at this point that it's my great pleasure to introduce to you the president of General Mills Natural and Organic Operating Unit. Flew in especially to see you from Minneapolis. Please have a warm welcome for Carla Vernon.
I'm rearranging the furniture. That's already the first sign that I'm just breaking the rules. Thank you so much, Will. What an honor to be here. I gotta move this back. I know. Let's not ruin anything in the course of it. Okay. It's an honor to be here. This is a very esteemed series that you host at Haas. I'm very familiar with some of the leading voices that have been able to be in front of you talking about these intriguing concepts, and so I'm honored to be invited to be a part of that legacy. I want to thank you, Will, and the entire Haas team. I want to thank my team. There are a lot of people here from the General Mills and Annie's team. There's even an Annie's alum in the audience over there. So thank you. Everything I'm about to say really represents the work of a lot of people. I get to bring voice to it, but there are so many hands, right? It's truly a many hands makes light work type of thing. I want to get started by telling you that I spent the first half of my life really trying to build a roadmap to having a purpose-driven life. And I'm now spending the second half of my life finding places where I can manifest that roadmap and that path that I worked so hard to build. So that's really the kind of two components of what I'd like to talk to you about today. And let's dive in. But before we dive in, I'm not an academic, I'm not a professor, I'm a mom, and I'm a social media hound, and I'm just a regular old person. And so I thought I could use to warm up my muscles a little, shake off the nerves by doing a little warm-up exercise and allow you to get to know me a little bit better. And that might let me get a little more comfortable in this setting. So bear with me if you will. Have you heard of this game we're going to play called Two Truths and a Lie? Yes. Okay, good. So most people have heard of it. For those of you that haven't heard of it, the way Two Truths and a Lie works is I'm going to tell you three things about myself. One of them is a lie. I'm not going to ask you to guess now. I'm going to ask you to listen to the presentation. If you get really bored and your mind is wandering, you can come back to really pondering which one of these is the lie. And then as we come back to the end of the presentation, we'll vote by applause, and you'll let me know which of these things is not true. So here we go. Once at a Prince concert, I was invited on stage to dance with Prince. In my spare time, I run a custom t-shirt and apparel business. I have been Time Magazine's Person of the Year. All right, great. Now you've got something to entertain you. The next part of this presentation is for parents of young children or parents-to-be. And it's all about how do you raise a purpose-driven human being. As you can see in this picture, I am a mother of teenagers. And so a lot of what I'm working through is quite an experiment myself on how to raise a purpose-driven human being. But I'd love to tell you what my parents did. My parents were very intentional about really trying to instill a sense of activism and purpose for me and my brother. My parents are products of the civil rights era. They came into adulthood in the civil rights era, and they taught us that you have to be active and participate in the justice movements that you believe in. So first, you see a picture of me here. I'm on my mother's lap. I'm the little girl in the little white shorts romper. And that is a picture from 1978. My mom and our neighbor, Barbara Carrier, decided to take their two daughters, me and Michelle, on a drive from Buffalo, New York, all the way to Washington, D.C., to march in the equal rights, the Women's March for Equal Rights, the ERA March on Washington, D.C. That was the march that was in effort to ratify an amendment that would guarantee women equal rights in the Constitution. But that was just one of the hands-on justice experiences my parents instilled in us. I would go door knocking with my father for political candidates that he believed in. As a teenager, my father and I would go volunteer at the telethon to raise money for the historically black colleges and universities, the United Negro Telethon. I realize that that's now an outdated concept. I don't know if you guys know what a telethon is. I don't know if you know what a telephone is. But that used to be one way that you had philanthropy and you could encourage people to participate by calling in. So my parents taught us early that it was important to stand up and be heard as far as justice and civil rights. But I also had my own things I believed in. This is also a picture of me, that little girl in the green jacket and the clogs. That's a picture of me and my favorite tree, my blue spruce. Boy, I can't even tell you the countless hours that I spent picking up pine cones and digging in the dirt around that blue spruce. We were buddies. And the time I would spend outside in my front yard with this blue spruce really pricked my heart for the planet. See, I grew up in the 1970s and 80s, and it was a time when we were surrounded with slogans like, give a hoot, don't pollute. Am I bringing something back for some of us? Keep America beautiful. That's different than make America great. And reuse, reduce, recycle. So I knew that I wanted to do something to make the world a better place. So I decided I needed to find a college and a major that I could do that would allow me to really do some good in the world. But I also knew I needed to find a college and a major that would comfort my parents that I'd be able to get a job. So off I went to Princeton to study ecology and evolutionary biology. And I did come out and I did get a job, so that was great. I got a job working for the Nature Conservancy, where I would help restore native prairie habitat just outside of Chicago, Illinois. There are a lot of native green spaces in urban metro areas that need protecting and need advocates. These pictures of me in a variety of fashionable 1990s hats are showing me in what one of the areas that we used to do restoration work called drop seed prairie. And we would remove invasive buckthorn, and I would also bring young people out for immersive experiences where they could learn more about the natural areas that weren't too far from the metro. So I really had a chance to participate in movements I believed in. I also came to learn through this period of my life that it was so important to have role models for you in the justice active work you wanted to do. And I was so fortunate because I came to the workforce in a time that was a unique, incredibly powerful moment in history. I started in the workforce in the year 1992. And there's a lot about this period that's historic. Not only did I think it was quite historic to actually graduate from college, that was pretty historic for me, but this was the era dubbed the Year of the Woman by journalists and historians. This was an incredible period in American culture where women were taking leadership roles, especially at state, local, and federal government positions in unprecedented numbers. There had never been numbers like this before. That year alone, 24 women got elected to the United States Congress. And that might not seem like a big number now, but to have that many first-time women elected in 1 year was remarkable. You've recently heard the last election called the Year of the Woman 2.0, but this was the original Year of the Woman. That was also a year that 5 women got elected to the United States Senate in 1 year. It was a remarkable time, and it was remarkable for me because one of those women elected to the United States Senate was this woman you see me with right here, United States Senator Carol Moseley Braun. She is an incredibly important person in U.S. history. The United States are almost 250 years old. And in the history of the United States, she is the first black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I like to say that twice because I don't think people process it. In the entire history of this country, this woman sitting in a picture with me was the first black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. And until Kamala Harris was elected, she was also the only black woman ever elected to the United States Senate in the history of this country. Until Kamala Harris was elected, she was the only one. So if you haven't heard of her, it's important that you do. At this time, I was also very fortunate. I had great mentors. Michelle Obama was my mentor. I got to listen to Hillary Rodham Clinton, who was the first lady who decided she wanted to play an active role in policy. And she took a great interest in trying to take a first swing at a national health care program. So this was an incredible time to enter the workforce. These women made me feel like I could be part of the power structure, and they made me feel like I could do something big. But I knew that to do something big, I was probably going to have to shift gears from the nonprofit and government sector. I was fortunate. I had a number of mentors at the time. Most of them were men, but they really gave me a sense that corporate America was a place that would have the resources to help me do big good. But they say you are the company you keep. So I knew it was important to find a place that would be like-minded with my values. So let me tell you a little bit more about General Mills and the place that I picked in order to do my eco-warrior on the inside. General Mills was founded in 1928. And we are a company that had values at our core ever since we were founded. Let me just give you a context of how old a company is that was founded in 1928. 1928 is the same year that Amelia Earhart became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. It's the same year Mickey Mouse was first introduced in the Steamboat Willie cartoon that you've probably seen. It was the year penicillin was discovered. It was a long time ago. It was when ladies dressed like flappers. General Mills is very old. And I want you to think about that as you think about the tensions we're wrestling today. But General Mills has 100 brands, brands that you know, brands that have hopefully been in your household, brands from everything from Cheerios to Larabar to Yoplait yogurt. We can be found in every grocery store in America and most grocery stores around the world. And General Mills, it's surprising for people to find out that we are also the second largest manufacturer of branded organic products in the United States. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that and how we came to get there. But first, I want to talk about mission and purpose. And to do that, I want to introduce you to our founders. So our history actually goes back much farther than 1928. Before we were called General Mills, we were a flour milling company on the banks of the Mississippi River, founded by a man named Cadwallader Washburn. And his competitor was on the opposite side, the other side of the Mississippi River, Charles Pillsbury. General Mills is now made up of both of these companies, so we like to think of them both as our founders. But these two were radical, innovative pioneers at their time. They were the Steve Jobs of their era. They discovered the ability to use the power of the Mississippi River to mill flour in massive quantities to make flour more available and convenient. And then they used the Mississippi River as a transportation system to get that flour all to every region of the United States. The Mississippi River basically was the information superhighway of its day. There was a critical moment in our history at General Mills that happened in 1878. If you don't know much about flour milling and you haven't grown up around flour mills, then you might not be aware that the tiny particles of dust that are created in the process of milling are highly combustible, extremely flammable. And one day in 1978, at what we call the Washburn A mill, there were several mills and they were identified by letters. So the Washburn A mill, a small spark ignited, and instantaneously there was an explosion and a fireball lit up the sky. If you look at news reports, people say you could hear the sound of the explosion far and wide across the Twin Cities. This is the area that we now think of as downtown Minneapolis. And as a result of that explosion, 18 adults died instantly. And then the fire was so fast and it spread so quickly to other mills, 4 more adults died as a result of the fire that spread. We were very fortunate relative to how much risk there could have been of loss of life because it was actually happened during a shift change when not everybody who would normally be in the building was in the building. So it's a terrible, tragic loss of life, and we're thankful it wasn't more. But our founder, Cadwallader Washburn, wasn't actually in Minneapolis when the explosion happened. He heard about it immediately. He was in Wisconsin. And immediately he rushed back to town. And as soon as he got back to town, he endowed a trust to build an orphanage. And at the time, that was also a very new concept. But he was so moved by what happened to the families in this circumstance that he didn't want to have other families who were dealing with bereavement and loss to have no resources. So he wanted to create a nurturing and safe environment for orphans. He also committed to the citizens of the Twin Cities that he would restore those jobs and that business back to the banks of the Mississippi River quickly because it was an important employer in town. And he did that. Within 2 years, he built a state-of-the-art, much safer, much bigger, more technologically advanced mill, and he got back into the business. But the reason why we often tell this story at General Mills is because this is the moment that defined for us the DNA in our company of being purpose-driven, community-oriented, and in service of the people who you depend on and who depend on you. And that DNA still runs through our company 150 years later. General Mills has been in the natural and organic sector for more than 20 years. With the acquisition of Cascadian Farm and Muir, Glen in 1999, we made our first foray into this arena. Now, at the time when General Mills acquired Cascadian Farm and Muir, Glen, this was actually quite an unconventional action for a traditional food company to take. There was no term big food back then because there just was only food companies. And for General Mills to have the vision to get involved to say people are going to be changing the way they eat in 1998 was very ahead of the time. It was also something that was very important because we knew that founders had a different insight and instinct for what they were building. And as we took those businesses into General Mills, we wanted to pay great respect to the purpose and the mission that those founders built into those businesses when they created it. 20 years later, we've learned a lot along the way about how to nurture the value and the original purpose of those businesses, and that's where I come in. My team and I are now part of what we call the triple bottom line operating unit. So you saw it described up here as president of the Natural and Organic Operating Unit, but our internal name for our business team is the Triple B. It's a little bit of a double entendre because we're also made up of brands that are focused either on pollinators, those are the bees, or we really try to have sustainable approaches to a meat snacking business that we use, and that team's the bison. And then, of course, Annie's, our cornerstone team that is really where the heart and the pioneering of our current energy and activism is coming from. Those are the bunnies. Got bunnies on my shoes. We love our bunnies. So we're trying to perpetuate and continue the legacy of our founders. But it wasn't always this way. You know, this chart that Will showed earlier used to be a very explosive piece of information. In 2016, and probably every other year before that for quite a while, there'd be a new publication of this chart that was almost an expose, if you will, revealing what big companies had acquired some of your favorite brands. And at the time, it was really the only way where your natural and organic enthusiasts could find out who owned their favorite brands. But transparency is the rule of the day now, right? And so this kind of scandal is no longer something that can remain under the cloak of darkness. This is something that companies certainly have to be visible about, but more importantly, founders have a voice now. They have a means to be heard. They have a means to express what they want and why they created their businesses. And most founders, when they do decide to make the trade-off or the transition, they will be public about expressing why they chose and how they've worked to find a like-minded, similarly valued business that they felt that they could entrust with something so precious to them. You know, my father was a world-class sprinter, and his specialty was the 4x100. I don't know if anyone in here is a sprinter or does relay, but there's something really special about sprinters and relay racers. If you just are an amateur and you don't know much about relay racing, it just looks fast and it looks like one person to the next person to the next person. But actually, relay racing is a very fine-tuned athletic craft. The handoff of the baton has to be smooth and seamless. And every runner on the 4-person relay team has different strengths and has a different role. And that's the way I think about these founder handoffs. There is so much value that must be protected and cared for. Those transitions must happen with care and with caring. But I also think it's important to know that most of the founders that decide to sell their businesses to a large company do so because often they've gotten to the point where they say, I've done all I can do. I've done all I know how to do. And at this point, I'm no longer the best person to advance the mission through this particular enterprise. But it's not enough to just be transparent. You have to be intentional. I just came from this great Oprah seminar. She's amazing. And she talked about how you have to have intention. What are you intending to do? You must set it out and you must state it if you want it to happen. And so in our operating unit, we challenged ourselves. There had never been an operating unit that had been a mix of all only acquired brands that was trying to keep the unique personalities of the brands, but yet define what was our shared purpose. So we spent a lot of work trying to write that down, and we came up with this. The triple bottom line operating unit believes that food choices matter. And our vision, you know, if you've ever done mission and vision work, you know it's really important to decide that you're here to do something other than just your own selfish business-oriented goals. What are you actually here in service of? So we said our vision is for General Mills to be the company most trusted to care for the planet and its people. Can you imagine working at a big food company and you're this little team in Berkeley and Austin, and you say, you know, I know we're small, but we're going to change this huge 150-year-old company, and we're going to make it the most trusted food company on the lips of the people. And they're going to say, when I think of somebody I could trust to take care of the planet, who do I think of? General Mills. That's our goal. And you know what? We felt super insane even writing that on a piece of paper. It felt crazy. But if you've heard about the concept of a BHAG, and if you know us at all, we're not the most normal types. We have ambitions that are outstretched and a little bit nuts, right? Because we want to heal and restore the planet. That's already a pretty bold wish. So we're one to be inclined to bold wishes. But the incredible thing is, we wrote these words about 2 years ago, and today it's happening. Our CEO was just with Wall Street investors yesterday morning at a conference called CAGNY, and he used the words regenerative agriculture. Yeah. So I guess Oprah knows what she's talking about. The beloved triple bottom line. You guys know a lot about the triple bottom line. And there's this new tension about how our company is going to be able to manifest really incorporating the triple bottom line into the practical realities of running their business. But I do also believe John Elkington is brilliant, although I can't claim him as my friend. Maybe someday. And when we first introduced the phrase triple bottom line at General Mills about 2.5 years ago, it was not a piece of the vernacular. But now it's like a common word or common phrase. It helped that we intentionally named our operating unit that so people could not ignore the concept. But I really like where John draws our attention. This is his quote: "Success or failure on sustainability goals cannot be measured only in terms of profit and loss. It must also be measured in terms of well-being for the billions of people and the health of our planet. And the sustainability sector, in moving the needle on these goals, has been decidedly mixed." So I actually find that intriguing because John's not only offering a challenge to companies, He's actually offering a challenge to the sustainability, the eco-warriors, the founders, whatever we want to call them. And he's saying, are we really moving the ball here, folks? Are we talking to ourselves, or are we really changing the system? And that's something we wrestle with a lot at General Mills. We know that our brands have to move beyond the philanthropy and offsets approach to doing good. And so we're really trying to understand, how do you run inside of a big corporation a genuinely results-driven triple bottom line? So let's get into that. First of all, these are the products that the Triple B operating unit sells, makes for you. I hope you're buying them. If you're not familiar with these products, we have Annie's. Annie's participates in about 20 awesome categories. Of course, the grandpappy of them all for Annie's is macaroni and cheese. We love our macaroni and cheese. We got new kinds for you. And Cascadian Farm, the oldest business in our portfolio, founded in 1972 by another crazy guy, Gene Kahn, who is still in the General Mills family. I'm so proud. My team went out to meet with Gene at his new farm about a year ago. We really appreciate staying connected to our founders. Cascadian Farm is a big business in both cereal and frozen foods. And then one of the newest members of our family, the Epic Provisions business, really oriented around high quality, meat-based protein snacks and beautiful fats and oils and broths. I just love this business. This is the business that's there for you on your Whole30 paleo keto needs. So if you're doing that, check us out. And then Muir Glen are always organic tomatoes, some of the best tasting tomatoes in the world. But what's awesome to me is that we have 33 categories in our portfolio, and there is probably not one store, not one bodega, not one university convenience store that doesn't sell at least one thing we make. So imagine that. Every day, every store, all the time. Big food really has scale. And that's our opportunity, right? Because we're actually trying to change the game here, folks. We are actually trying to do noticeable good. But at Big Food, we've also realized that our scale means that we have to own up to our impact. And to be honest, there are a lot of ways in which Big Food has been a part of the problem. But first, I think it's important to just celebrate that there have been a lot of advances that were made in service of driving scale within the food movement. You know, there was a period of time when we weren't able to get food safely to all the people who needed it. And so the green movement, or the Green Revolution, the Green Revolution was really designed to help answer that. To say that even though there's limited arable land, and especially in some places in Africa and Asia, we can apply more tools to drive more efficiency and scale of knowledge in order to help prevent starvation and get more nutrient-dense foods to more people. And we really did it, folks. We did it. It's hard to imagine now because we're so fortunate and we have so much access to food. But that wasn't the case even as recent as the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And now, access to clean and safe food is much more the norm. It's very rare that it's not, I'm not saying it's not the case, but it's much more rare that people would have to do without than they used to. But the problem with these efforts they were really designed around monocrops, monocultures. They were driven by scale. There were all kinds of new chemicals, some of them synthetic, that were applied in order to advance things through more efficient, scalable, fast means. As a result of how we impacted the agricultural system, food started to have a big impact on driving climate change. So 50% of global greenhouse gas emissions come from the food system, or come from agriculture. And 1/3 of all global greenhouse gas emissions come from food. So the fact that we are in every store, everywhere, every day, means we have an opportunity to change course and start getting involved in driving more positive restoration, more positive incorporation with ecosystems, and how we participate with farmers and farming communities. There's a saying, measure twice, cut once. And that's very dear to me because I have a team that loves measurement. They love measurement because what you measure, right? What you inspect, you respect. So we want to be able to track the good we do. We don't want to talk about it in theory. We don't want to talk about it in principle. So we're constantly working to figure out how we work with partners and find ways to actually measure and track the results of our impact. I just want to tell you a little bit about some of them. We work very directly with stakeholders who are helping to measure the impact of deforestation, soil degradation, and disruption in the water tables. We partner with organizations like the Nature Conservancy, like the Climate Collaborative, to make sure that we have true, legitimate partnership and tracking and accountability for the advancements that we're trying to make. The triple bottom line framework really requires that if you're going to address the planet bottom line, that you be able to turn it into metrics and KPIs in business. Act, right? Measure first, measure twice, cut once. We also must act, though. We just can't live in the theoretical area forever. So we must find actions within our tool set, which for us is branded food company, is the products we sell on your shelves, to drive the improvement. So one of the things that we do is really look for ways where we can marry the planet bottom line with the financial bottom line. And you know, sustainability doesn't need to be all about sacrifice. One example of an area we've found is when we find ways to reduce the amount of packaging materials we use in order to get our products from here to there, not only do we save money on packaging inputs, but we also reduce our impact on all of the pieces of the supply chain that we put pressure on when we create those packages. So we are finding the win-wins. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how we're partnering with our farmer partners and our farmer communities, like on this beautiful new experimental mac and cheese product we launched a couple years ago. And I'm going to get to that when we get into Planet. I want to tell you, though, that one of the things we've figured out is what are things we can do only because we're big that others can't do? Why don't we play to the area of our strength? So one of the things that we've done is we've decided to put some doggone big markers down. But at a company like General Mills, we don't talk about it unless we know we can actually drive the action. Because if we put it out in the public, by the way, we are accountable not only to you, our buyers, but we're also accountable to our shareholders and our investors, like BlackRock, who want to know what are we doing about it. So I'm really proud at one of the innovations my team piloted. This is one of the only things going on like this in the food industry anywhere. In 2018, we made a partnership with Midwest BioAg to invest in 34,000 acres of conventional farmland, 34,000 acres of conventional row crop farmland where wheat is grown. And we said, we're going to help create a partnership to convert all 34,000 acres of that wheat and row crop farmland to be organic farmland that uses regenerative practices. People who know acreage always go like, ooh, that's a lot of acres, right? But that's what we can do, because guess what wheat goes into? Macaroni and cheese. See? It works together. And as we do this, we have to find a new way to work with our farmer partners. One of the innovative things we're doing is we are creating long-term contracts so that we take the risk out of the proposition for the farmers as they transition. Transitioning your land from conventional to organic has risks, and it has economic risks. And if you are studying farmer economics, and you are aware of farmer economics, you know that our farmers and our farming communities they're living close to the edge. They cannot afford to take on the burden of this without companies helping make this feasible. We're also creating discussion groups and cohorts for farmers to share the practices and the insights. And sometimes also what has to happen in farming communities is that some of the folks have to give other folks the courage, the energy, and the confidence to come along with change. Change is risky when you run a business that's really running a very tight financial ship. Then, the year later, we put down a bigger marker. This is what I do love about the bananas scale of Expo and how it's grown to be 80,000 people. When we decide to do something big and we can share it at the Expo community, we can really inspire other big food companies to come along and put their big marker down on something. Nobody wants to be left out of being one of the cool kids on this front. At the last Expo in 2019, we said General Mills is going to make a commitment that we will help use our resources to advance the conversion of 1 million acres of conventional farmland to use regenerative practices. We're doing this both by staffing up, by making sure that we have brands that want to use these ingredients, and by working with farmers to learn more closely what are the challenges that are preventing them from being able to adopt these practices. When we talk about regenerative agriculture, what we are talking about is farming practices that intentionally protect and enhance the ecosystems. Farming practices that use things like cover crops and build pollinator habitat and really work with the water table and water system. But we're also focused on what it means for farmers and farmer economics. Because we can't do this if we can't make a feasible path forward for our farmers and our suppliers, the superheroes of the industry. But the other thing is we've got to bring shoppers along. We've got to make this something that not only my CEO is talking to Wall Street about, but I need your sister-in-law or your cousin talking about this too, or your aunt or your parents. I need them to go to the store and say, what was that cereal that's going to help the planet? That's what we need in order to make this work full circle. So I'm really proud that the oldest brand in our portfolio, as I told you, Cascadian Farm, was founded in 1972. And it has always stood for certified organic. It has not veered from that course. But back in 1972, there actually wasn't anything called certified organic. That's a whole long other story. We're not going to get into that now. The process of creating the policy and the regulations to build a reliable and trustworthy, iconic mark that we can all identify with and know how to trust our food. But Cascadian Farm has always been right there up at the leadership front of advancing these new practices. So I'm really proud because our Cascadian Farm team is playing once again in the long game. We are working on commercializing a perennial grain. So for 10,000 years, wheat and annual grains have been the main grains used in the food system. Perennial grains would be a real improvement for us because it means it's a grain that you don't have to till and replant every year and stir up the soil and stir up those the carbon out of the soil and bring it into the atmosphere, thus exacerbating global warming and climate change. To be able to have a perennial root that can run deep in the soil and bring carbon down and bring water down deep in the soil and build rich, integrated biodiversity at the soil, the microscopic and macronutrient level of the soil, that is cool stuff, folks. Have you ever gotten your hand on a piece of that spring, moist, brown, dark soil that's got worms in it and it smells so good? That's what we're talking about, says Carla with her favorite blue spruce tree. That's what we're talking about. And we are trying to pioneer using a grain like that in commercial practices. But Kern's has only been something that's been in agriculture practices for 20 years. Wheat, 10,000, Kernza, 20. So we've got a lot to learn, and we haven't got it all right. Rather than me explain it, I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of this PBS episode where I talk about where we're at with our Kernza efforts. One more time.
And last spring, General Mills, one of the biggest food corporations in the world, produced a Kernza cereal. Carla Vernon is president of the company's natural and organic unit.
We want to be an inspiration to other big players. We want to be a support network for farmers. What do you think?
Really crunchy, just a little bit sweet. Mm-hmm. That's really good.
Good.
But there are hurdles, like a very limited supply. Only about 100 farmers are growing Kernza in the whole country. Vernon planned to sell honey-toasted Kernza in a handful of small grocery stores.
But that first crop of Kernza that we were excited when we were harvesting it, we were ready to turn it into cereal, about 95% of that crop failed. And I'm going to tell you the truth, there were some tears in our offices here.
So General Mills introduced a limited edition version online with the profits going to Kernza research. Despite the setback, Vernon says the company plans to introduce more Kernza products with the goal of making them widely available by 2040. In the meantime, Kernza researchers are plowing ahead.
Plowing ahead. Got it? Oh gosh, I love it. I love a good news clip. So, you know what? It was an experiment. And it's really right in the vein of our founders, our pioneers. Man, founders are so courageous. They are so bold. They are fearless in the crazy stuff they try that's never been done before, and there's nothing in the market that even tells you it's going to make any sense to do it. Maybe you're the only one who even wants that thing you're making. That's often the case for founders. And I love that spirit. If you knew the stories of the Cascadian farm founder, Gene Kahn, he was a city kid. He didn't even grow up on a farm, dropped out of college, told his parents he was going to go to a farm out in Washington State and just try to figure out how to fix the planet. I mean, if you're a parent, that's not a comforting thing to hear. Founders are doing all of these wild things. And for us in big corporations, that's not in our comfort zone. To do something uncertain and we're not going to get the payback right away. But with this Kernza effort, our goal is to commercialize this thing at scale by 2040. I hope to be retired when I buy my first box of this thing at scale. But that's incredibly different for us at a corporation to say, we're going to let you know publicly we are committed. We're going to stay on it. We're going to work with the researchers who are working on it. We're going to work with the farmers that are trying to have crops and figure out what went wrong last time and do it right the next time. And I'm very proud to say that this is just one of many examples of saying, yes, we will do things where the payback isn't always instant. Yes, we are in it for the long term. Yes, we've committed to helping make sure 1 million acres of land gets converted into regenerative practices. That's the kind of company we are. But there's another bottom line that I told you about when I told you about Cadwallader or Washburn, and that was the people. So the people, I think, have always been an unspoken bottom line for us, but I love that it's incorporated into the triple bottom line framework more specifically. So first, what we needed to do was think about what people are we talking about here. When we start going off in this new direction and telling our corporation we want to be a triple bottom line oriented set of brands and we're going to have a people bottom line, one of the things that's so unique about the businesses in our portfolio is that they are much more directly tied with all of our stakeholders, and a lot of our stakeholders have a much stronger opinion about what happens with these particular brands than some of the others. So one of the things I did was I just sketched out this stakeholder wheel to try to think of the various representative fields of play that we're talking about when we're talking about our stakeholders. And it really brought to mind these different arenas, whether it was from supply chain, or it was our own employees and our own consumers, or our investors or Wall Street. There was a lot to think about. And this, one of the things we try to do is, as we run our business through the year, we're trying to make sure we understand which activities and which apertures do we do that really address the needs of a given set of stakeholders. I don't have time to tell you about what we're doing for each and every one of them, but I think talking a lot about some of our supply chain and manufacturing stakeholders and sourcing partners is very important. As part of our journey to do the right thing for the people that we work with, we're working to drive improved outcomes for farmers. One of the ways we do this, an example, just one of many, is our commitment to using fair trade cocoa. As an entire company, we've made this very public commitment. We're also exploring ways that we can specifically know our farmers better and really incorporate the variety of crops that they could use that would guarantee that we would purchase the various ingredients that they need if they're going to have better crop rotation and better integrated, mixed variety of crops and cover crops throughout the year. So we've got 4 Montana farmers that we worked with specifically and designed a line of 2 macaroni and cheeses and 1 line of those little bunny cookies, you know, that everybody, the little bunny cookies everybody likes. And we worked with these Montana farmers in order to say, what crops make sense for you that you could begin doing at scale on a regenerative basis, and how can we work with our product developers to think of something delicious that families and kids want to eat, and then we can kind of bring the best of both worlds together. So we're sourcing wheat, peas, and spelt for these products from these specific farmers. But what's so cool is that, you know, General Mills is also the company that makes Wheaties. And you know, if you get to be a Wheaties champion and you get to have your face on a box, it's pretty iconic, I've come to learn, for a lot of athletes to get themselves on a Wheaties box is like one of those lifetime goals for a lot of people. So we've turned our mac and cheese boxes into a little bit of our own celebration. If you turn the back of these boxes around, you can read about the exact farmer and the exact farm that those ingredients came from in that single source box. And in that way, we really want to celebrate the heroes that we're counting on in order to change the food system. The other thing we're doing is we're making sure that we provide multi-year contracts and that we are working in partnership to understand really what kind of crops can we collaborate on together. Some of my favorite people, right here, my team for sure. But my team just represents how we feel about all employees at General Mills. I told you that we've been about the people ever since Cadwallader Washburn had that tragedy in 1878. And today, one of the things we're very intentional about at General Mills is trying to create what we call a community of belonging. And we really practice this with great intention in the Triple Bottom Line Operating Unit. We celebrate cultural and faith traditions of all of our employees. And we try to shake it up, try to learn something new about each other every once in a while. I think what we've got here, just in this picture, is our celebration of Lunar New Year and our kickoff for Black History Month. We have tried to make sure we try to make sure we celebrate Gay Pride, we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, and we just try to encourage being imperfect in your knowledge of someone else's cultural truth or lived experience, but being really curious and embracing and celebrating and elevating their experience and coming to know more about it. But one of the cool things we do as an enterprise is we used to have this thing called safety contact. So I told you that ever since the A Mill fire, safety has been one of the top priorities at our company. So for my first 15 years at General Mills, I would find that we had this habit of starting meetings, any kind of meeting, volume meeting or meeting about are we on track, are we off track, with just like a 3-minute informal presentation of a safety fact that would be practical in your life. Could be anything like, should I wear that mask at the airport? Or what do I do with my Christmas tree after the holidays are over? At what point does it become a flammable risk in my home? Could be anything. They are fascinating, by the way. There's a lot of safety stuff, especially if you live in Minnesota, icy road conditions, that we learn about. But even our Annie's team, California-based, our Texas team experiences floods, our Annie's team experiences wildfire. We're very conscious about sharing that. Well, one of the new traditions we started about 1.5 years ago was called inclusion contact. How can we start a meeting where the first 3 minutes we learn something about a different perspective on someone else's lived experience? This week we did an inclusion contact on the importance of being considerate enough to learn people's names and courageous enough to say names even when you're uncomfortable, that you may not know how to say it or whatever. And the importance of people being able to hear their own names said out loud by their colleagues. That is how you create a culture of belonging. And at the corporation, we also had, what I love is, it's the kind of place where one person can decide to make a change and the ripple can be vast. We had an employee, his name is Courtney, and he had gone to an event at the YWCA. And it was called Community Conversations. And it was an event at the YWCA trying to encourage people from different parts of the metro area to learn about each other in a facilitated format, following a lot of the Native American traditions of having a talking stick and listening with respect when it wasn't your turn to talk. He brought this back to General Mills in a twist, in the form of courageous conversations. And now, across the 36,000 employees of General Mills, sometimes we will simultaneously, in all locations, facilitate bold, candid, courageous conversations about very awkward or delicate cultural topics, sensitive topics. My Annie's team will be in Berkeley hosting a simultaneous conversation, and my Minneapolis team might be at General Mills headquarters in the company cafeteria, probably as big as some cafeteria on this campus. Standing room only, executives to interns, having conversations about things like Islamophobia, transgender rights, allyship, mental health. And you'll see executives all the way from the CEO on down saying, in this conversation, I'm just an employee and a member of your community, and I'm here to learn or I'm here to give. Because the people bottom line has always mattered for us, and it still matters. But you know which one matters also. The profit bottom line. And you know what? I'm not ashamed about that. Because we have a responsibility. We're a publicly traded company. That means that if you are a California teacher and part of your teacher's pension is invested in stable companies so that you know that when it's time for you to draw out your pension, whoever's been managing that pension fund money for the California teachers or the California firefighters has been picking safe and steady, reliable stocks, so that the investment will turn out to be a resource for that family or that individual who needs it. That's the kind of responsibility we have when we're publicly traded. Our shareholders are basically our lenders. They are giving us money to buy a stock because they believe that what we will do with it will be wise. So when we advance this concept of triple bottom line, one of the things our team has to think about is, we are very proud to be able to continue to scale our products, to make products that are in demand and products that frankly beat the competition so that more people will want to buy ours. Because certainly the more money we make, the more good we can do. The more farmers we can partner with, the more experimental we can be with new forms of sustainable packaging, new forms of supply chain. But we also have to be the bet that an investor wants to place in their portfolio. So it is a very important responsibility for all of us, including the students and the people interested in this topic of a triple bottom line. It's important for us to all prove this theory out, that it is true that we can drive this kind of value. If we want to be able to continue to be attractive places for people like BlackRock to place their bet so that we can have more money to do more good, right? That's the true virtuous cycle. All right. I'm about to wrap it up. And I wanted to wrap it up with this quote that's very important to me. Lady Bird Johnson, you saw one of my other favorite first ladies earlier. Lady Bird Johnson was the first lady of the United States. She was married to Lyndon Johnson, and she was a very proud Texan. Is there anybody here who's from Texas? Okay, I'm a Longhorn, so we always hook them. I don't know which camera's live. She was ahead of her time. Lady Bird Johnson really believed that it was important to give people a beautiful experience, but she also believed we need to be good stewards of natural resources. And the way she did that, if you are a Texan, you've seen this. She had a wildflower program. She actually worked to get funding to scatter millions of wildflower seeds along the highway system of Texas, so that in the springtime, when the spring blooms, wildflowers bloom all over Texas. And I love that she placed such an importance on native species, on wildflowers, on something that was renewable and was where it belonged to grow. If you are in Texas, I guarantee you've taken either your baby picture in the bluebonnets, you've taken your fiancé romance prom picture in the bluebonnets, you've taken your wedding picture in the bluebonnets. In fact, I spared you because my husband and I took a romantic picture in the bluebonnets because we met in Austin. If you want to see it, I did post it on my social media. It's on my Twitter and my Instagram. So if you want to see me and Jason in the bluebonnets, Carla inspired, it's on the gram, it's on the twit. Okay, so I love this quote. The environment, after all, is where we all meet, where we all have a mutual interest. It's the one thing that all of us share. Unity is my theme because big food is a necessary part of this change we're trying to drive. And I am so proud to represent this stakeholder in this adventure we're all on to advance mission and purpose. So thank you very much for inviting us. Thank you to my friends, new and old, for coming.
Were we in the same mime class? Were you?
Which one? Which one? This one? Do you know the flapper dance?
Here, sit down. Okay. No, that was fantastic. Oh, you forgot this.
Oh, yeah! Oh, my goodness. Right. Okay, now we're going to do this by applause, and some of these answers could really hurt my feelings. Okay? So, remember, the game is 2 truths and a lie. So, I will tell you 3 things about myself again, in case you weren't here or you forgot, or you were so captivated. But, and one of these is a lie. I'll tell you all 3, and then we'll go back through them. We'll clap. The thing that gets the loudest clap is the thing you guys have decided is that I'm lying about. The first thing. At a Prince concert, I was invited on stage to dance with Prince. No. It's not time. If you think I'm lying, though, that's what that clap represents. In my spare time, I run a custom t-shirt and apparel business. I have been Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Okay, let's go through it. Who thinks I'm lying that I was invited to dance on stage with Prince? What's wrong with you people? You ain't seen my grooves. Okay, who thinks I'm lying that in my spare time I run a custom apparel and t-shirt business? And who thinks I'm lying that I've been Time Magazine's Person of the Year? Oh, thank you. Okay, that's nice. The lie is Prince. I know, because believe me, it should have happened in real life. People who know me know this should have happened. I have danced this close to Prince, but I have never been invited on stage at a concert to dance with Prince. Safety knew that wasn't a good idea. I do run a custom apparel and t-shirt business in my spare time. That's probably not a smart idea, but it is on my Facebook. And I didn't wear one of my t-shirts today because I didn't want to give it away. But I've been Time Magazine's Person of the Year, and if you were born in 2006 or later, so have you, because Time Magazine's Person of the Year 2006 was you, Y-O-U, in recognition of the impact that we all have in advancing a totally new culture of social media.
Way to go.
Boom. Congratulations, Time Magazine's Person
Thank
of the
you.
Year.
You were there.
You.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Thank you, Carla Vernon.
Thank you. Look at the water's going.
Well, there's a direct track from UC Berkeley and even the Haas School right into Annie's and General Mills. We are a proud purveyor of talented people to your organization.
Yes.
So
That's
we're very
legit.
proud of that. And some of my favorite students worked in your, and friends and colleagues. So we really appreciate you coming here. And we just had a wonderful experience writing a case study. And Elaine, wave to everyone. Wave to the camera over here or there. Elaine just got her MBA at Haas, and she led the team that did the case study. And to do a good case study, you have to have skills similar to like a proctologist, right? Well,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a very in-depth exploration of, you want to get under the hood, so to speak. We love the stories, but we want to, like, what's
Yeah,
the truth?
right,
Like really,
yeah.
what's going on here? How does this work? How does it work that like a small company that represents a fraction of the revenues and resources of a big $17 billion company, how does the $1 billion group in the $17 billion company, how does the tail wag the dog or the dog? So that was what we were really interested in
Yeah.
the case. And you were very kind to be very candid with us. And we got to talk to people all over the company, the head of the sustainability, the head of supply chain. And one thing that struck me that was really interesting was that as a brand-driven company, everyone in the business has had an experience on the brand. Even the supply chain people, the purchasing people, they were all like brand-driven. That meant that they were incredibly responsive and sensitive to the word you use, consumers.
Yes.
I don't like that word, but
Okay.
we'll talk about
People,
that later.
folks.
Yeah, eaters. But anyway, the point is that when I asked the guy who was in charge of Cheerios what he thought of all this, he said, well, we think it's great. And I said, well, what do you think about it for Cheerios? And he said, well, we're not sure our consumers really care about regenerative agriculture.
Yeah.
So, that established this really interesting tension that you have a word for that inside. I'll let you decide whether you want to use that or not. But so I want to have you talk a little bit about managing the creative tension. And while you think about that, if you want to ask Carla a question, please come to one of these microphones and we'll try to get you in. We have a little shorter period for questions tonight, so try to ask them succinctly. But anyway, talk to us about how you manage creative tension as a leader in this big company.
Well, first of all, I think that the cycle time is really shortening now from something being a revolutionary or unconventional idea to it becoming actually a mainstream or a normalized idea. I think that cycle time is shortening. I just look at some of these like diet principles as an example. Something like keto or Whole30. You guys are out in the crucible of everything that's like experimental and develops. So if you don't have some reason that you're ever going to the South or the Midwest of the United States, you might not have the perspective. But if you have a relative in the Midwest or a relative in the South, I encourage you to always be tuned in to culturally what's different there, right? Everything is a step or two behind on the trends. So when you see something get known in the Midwest, like I saw this guy in my sales organization and I said, oh, you look great. And he's like, oh, I just finished a Whole30. And I was like, okay, we know if Bill just finished a Whole30, that thing has mainstreamed. And I think Whole30 was new probably 5 years ago, but I think the cycle time is shortening. So I still believe it requires courageous leadership from out front. And sometimes what I tell myself or what I tell my folks is, First of all, I've seen this a number of times before, having led the company through to something that might be new and a trend until it finally catches on. And I know how it's going to work. We're going to feel really crazy for a while, but if our conviction is strong, I will protect you. I will be the shield. I will move the naysayers out of the way by influence, by persuasion, by, rank if I have to. And you just keep doing what you're doing because I can see that the time is near. And so as a leader, sometimes it's my job to protect that the work can happen while we bring the stakeholders along.
That's really helpful. Yeah, cover from the top.
Yeah.
Really invested and committed. And also creating the environment for people, obviously, to take risks.
Yes.
And try new things.
Yes.
I mean, that's what you're doing. You're
Yes.
really setting the trend in the whole company for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exciting. All right, if you have a question, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, but make your question really concise tonight, because we have just a little bit of time.
I'm a long talker, and that quiz that we have to take,
Yeah, we're going to have to.
quiz is soon.
Yeah.
I hope this is going to get great ratings for the mid-year. This is the mid-year rating evaluation.
Yeah. We'll try a few more minutes.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I'm a freshman interested in environmental economics and policy.
Hi, Sophia.
And my question to you is, your team's doing amazing things with brands like Annie's and Cascadia, but I'm really wondering about how GM is trying to spread your values of your team, like the planet aspect of the triple bottom line, to its 96 plus other brands like Cheerios or Pillsbury.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for knowing about those other brands. Today, I got an email from a friend of mine who works both in our unit and in our yogurt unit. We have brands like Yoplait and Liberté, and we, the thing that came out in the glass jars is called Oui, the French spelling O-U-I. And I just saw their 3-year sustainability ambition for the yogurt we call it the yogurt operating unit. That was so exciting. I think 2 things happen. One is when a company like ours, when you are public and you go out and tell the public 1 million acres by 2030, then you actually need to make sure you have a little committee that is somewhere saying, how many acres, which kind of products can drive those acres? Have I talked to the leaders of those teams to say, you better bring me back a plan because I've now put the company's reputation on the line to say we're going to do it. So I'm counting on you troops to fold that into a little bit of everybody's plan. So I think that these public commitments are going to create a pull mechanism because a company like us always aims to be accountable. I can't say at another company that makes commitments and doesn't really care if anybody ever checks, but that's not us. And so I'm seeing my peers now have to fold that in as they're bringing forward their growth plans.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Helen. I'm studying conservation and resource studies. And thank you so much for telling your great stories and actually devoting the business to a lot of sustainable and community and human-friendly practices. That's very commendable. My question is, you introduced us to a lot of these good practices, but how do you plan to push that forward into a movement? Because the practices of just a few companies won't make a big difference. It has to do with how we as consumers or eaters or just humans consider our relationship with nature and and also the relationship with each other. I think that's key to sustainability.
Yeah, I love that. So what I gotta say is we just have to try a lot of things all at once because some people are inspired by the head, some people are inspired by the heart. And so what works for you won't necessarily be the same thing that inspires my husband, Jason, who's very financially oriented and super head-oriented in the brain. And so we have to try a lot of things at once. That's why you see us doing something like having Annie's SKUs that on the back of the box introduce a farmer. Because we know Annie's really connects with kids. And boy, you want to create a movement. If you can speak to a generation, generational change will manifest. And I'm telling you, I know that for sure. You guys are part, I hate to say it, but you're part of a different generation than me. Thank you, I know I look young. But your generation is already making change on things like gender nomenclature, right? That's one example. So one way we do it is we're going to speak to the youth, and we're going to talk about topics that we think that they are going to care about, because they've got to inherit this planet. And also, I better make it delicious, because I got to talk to, like, my husband Jason, who's not going to buy the next box if he didn't like the bowl of cereal, right? At the same time, we have to talk to Wall Street, because Wall Street spends a lot of money deciding which companies are winners and which companies are losers. And if you know that Amazon's a winner and Apple's a winner and Tesla's a winner and they're going to get all the money, they're going to get all the airtime, whatever their CEO's talking about is going to kind of seem like what's cool. Bezos has dedicated $10 million 2 days ago. We've all already heard about it, right? So we got to talk to Wall Street and get them excited about regenerative agriculture, which means we had to take our CEO to a farm. So we did, Christina and I, our CEO doesn't like a lot of fanfare. So it was just a group of maybe 4 of us, and we took him to the original Cascadian farm. It's not easy to get there, and if you know anything about CEOs, they don't have a lot of spare time. He gave us 2 days. He didn't take any calls. We took him out. We showed him the soil, what do you call that? The water infiltration soil demo. Our CEO has a backyard garden, so he could understand the concept and relate it to what he knows about his own small-scale work. But inspiring him when he saw the 3 different stages of soil, desert level, desertification depleted, that chocolate cake, wormy, awesome soil that I told you about, and one in between. And he saw that the one with the chocolate cake worms looked like water was purified as it came out of that soil versus the water that came off and just rolled off that dry baseball diamond type soil. By inspiring a CEO, you want to talk about a movement, he's got 36,000 employees. He's also got a peer group of other CEOs. So my theory is we're just going to do a lot of different stuff and try to infect at all levels. And I don't expect everyone to come along at the same pace. People won't be at your pace. Haas, you guys are like in it deep. You had the 15, what were they?
Systems dance.
Systems dance. People have no idea what that is. Okay? You are really ahead. You can't get frustrated with people that they can't come at your pace. We have to love our way there by talking to them in a language that they can hear. You know? So.
You've been so inspiring. If you have questions afterward, you can come talk to Carla for a few minutes after you fill out the midterm.
Only after you give a 5-star, whatever number of stars.
What
is it? We're not bribing.
We're not supposed to say that. We actually have to leave the room.
Oh,
so no, not you, but
give your honest opinion.
Listen, we've had all these luminaries here. We've had Brian Terry, we've had Carla Vernon, we've had Alice Waters, we've had Naomi Starkman, all these like Kathleen Merrigan. I mean, these are the shape-shifters of the food system. Next week, though, we're going to have 9 people from campus who are moving from their learning in the classroom right into practice. And they're going to come up here and share with you their 5 to 7 minute stories of how they're translating and taking the steps to transform the food system right from the campus. So Changemakers at Berkeley next week. Big thank you to Carla for coming. And see you next week. And over to you, Lila.